A surviving person says, well, I just hope that nothing else goes wrong. We've all done it. But a thriving person says, I am willing to grow into something larger than this moment. A surviving consciousness gets defensive, whereas a thriving consciousness gets expressive. Now again, please hear me. Survival consciousness is understandable. After enough stress, enough uncertainty, enough upheaval, survival mode becomes familiar. Thank you, Brian and Todd. Wonderful job and wonderful song. Anything is possible. This morning we're gathered together not only to have our regular celebration and lesson and meditation and all the stuff we do on Sunday morning, but it's also the day of our quarterly town hall, which means we're doing something very important together. We're not just showing up as attendees. We are showing up as stewards, as co-creators, as people who care about what this ministry is becoming and how we can serve in even greater ways in the days ahead. So I want to begin with as a line of scripture that has echoed across many generations. You've probably all heard it. Where there is no vision, the people perish. Many of us know it in that form. Other translations use the word revelation instead of vision, but the meaning is much the same. Where there is no spiritual sight, no sense of direction, no larger understanding of who we are and what we are here to do, things begin to unravel. Now, things are not unraveling, okay? But if you look around the world, they are. And sometimes things have to unravel for something greater to be born. As many of you who have been here for a long time know, that around the pandemic and the couple years right after, we kind of unraveled. We had a non-usable building. We were financially a mess. We're in decent shape now. I'm going to talk more about that. And certainly we have a building that is usable. But we look around our world, and it looks like the world is unraveling. And then it begins to feel in our personal lives like things are unraveling. And one of the causes of that, in fact, I would say the only real cause of that, is when we lose focus, when we lose vision. Because what happens, it snowballs. We begin to lose heart, we lose discipline, we lose our way. And it's interesting that people, nations, institutions, families do not disappear overnight when this happens. Usually, they slowly drift. They get into an attitude, a consciousness of just settling. They become reactive instead of creative. They spend all of their energy trying to maintain rather than transform. They become a people managing decline instead of embodying possibility. It happens over and over and over again through history. We can trace even the history of our own country, where for generation after generation and after generation, we always had a vision of what we were becoming. Whether it was right or wrong, that's for history to judge. But then we kind of lost our way. We lost that vision, and things began to unravel. It happens in churches too. We have a very, very nice vision statement. It's warm and fuzzy. But do we have a clear vision of where we're going? Do we have a clear vision of why we're here, of what we're becoming? For those of you who are looking, where's the vision statement? It's right over there. So what is true in the world is true in families, it's true in institutions, and even in spiritual communities. Because vision isn't just a nice idea. It's not a motivational slogan. It's the ability to see to see beyond the present moment and align with something larger. Vision is the capacity to imagine what can be instead of becoming trapped by what is. It's literally spiritual sight. And that's what I want to talk about this morning. The difference between a community that is merely surviving or a community that is truly thriving, because there is a difference. Surviving says, let's get through these times. Let's just get through this. Thriving says, let's grow through this. Surviving says, how do we hold on? Thriving says, how do we become more? You see, surviving is often about endurance. Now, let me say something right up front. Surviving is not shameful. There are seasons in life where survival is a victory. There are times when we are getting through a hard year, excuse me, a hard diagnosis, a hard grief, a hard chapter in a relationship, a hard financial stretch, a hard season in a church. That's all part of life. It is in itself a sign of courage and faith to survive through that. And sometimes it is holy. But we are not meant to build our identity around survival. At some point, Spirit begins asking us very deep questions. Questions like, are you just trying to make it through? Or are you ready to become something more? Are you just preserving what is left? Or are you preparing for what is emerging? That's a question for each person as individuals. It's a question for nations. It's a question for spiritual communities as well. So let's look at what happens when a community has no vision. It becomes reactive. It starts to live from crisis instead of from calling. It starts asking questions like, what do we do about this problem instead of what is Spirit asking us to do now? It becomes cautious, flatter, and less creative. The energy goes into patching holes rather than building futures. Without vision, people become disconnected from purpose. Oh, we may still be busy. We may still be active. We may still be sincere. But we're no longer animated by a clear sense of why. Why do we exist? And when that happens, something begins to dry up in the soul of the community. You can feel it. Just look around our world today. Look around our nation. The excitement fades. The imagination narrows. Hope becomes fragile. And people stop asking what is possible and start assuming that limitation is wisdom. But it is not. It is not wisdom. It is fear dressed in practical clothing. And fear always tries to sound reasonable. Fear says, don't expect too much. Don't stretch. Don't commit too deeply. Fear says, just be grateful for what you have and don't ask for anything more. Fear sometimes says to communities, can't afford to tithe. Gratitude is holy. Gratitude is holy. That's what begins to change things. When we begin to remember what we have to be grateful for. Fear is not. Playing small is not wisdom. Shrinking futures is not spirituality. And unity has never, ever, ever taught a spirituality of diminishment. We teach that life is ever unfolding. What was Jesus' mission statement? I have come that you may have life and have it abundantly. All good things, health, relationship, joy, vision, and abundance in all its forms. We teach that. We teach that it's always expressing more, always revealing new possibilities. Unity teaches that God is not a static force, but a living presence, moving, expressing, and creating through all of us all the time. And if divine life is always expressing, then stagnation is never, ever our final calling. We are not called to become smaller and smaller expressions of Spirit. We are called to become more transparent to Spirit, more available to Spirit, more useful to Spirit, and more courageous in Spirit. And yes, more trusting in Spirit. This means that vision matters. Vision is not just positive thinking. It's not pretending that everything is fine. Vision is not saying, well, let's just think happy thoughts and everything will magically work out. That's not vision. That's avoidance with a smile. True vision sees clearly and still refuses to be identified by what it sees. Let's be honest. Vision can look directly at chaos and still say, this is not the end of the story. It doesn't say, no, things are not chaotic right now. That's all illusion. Well, it may be illusion, but it's the illusion we are experiencing. So we don't deny it, but we know it's not the end of the story. There is greater possibility here. Vision can feel the exhaustion of a difficult time or times and still say, Spirit's not finished with us yet. That is why one of the reasons I believe so deeply that vision is spiritual. Vision is not denial of current conditions. It's practical. It's real. It is, however, the refusal to worship whatever the current condition may be. Yes, there is chaos in our times. We all know that. There is instability in our culture. There is division. There is anxiety. There is fear. There is uncertainty. There is a constant sense for many people that the ground is shifting rapidly underneath them. But I do not believe chaos gets the last word. I believe we will emerge. In fact, I believe we are emerging. I really do. Not because I think everything's going to be easy overnight. Not because I think humanity suddenly stops being human. Not because I think we will be spared every difficulty. I believe we will emerge from these times and these situations because life has always had a way of expressing and pressing towards greater and greater manifestation. Many of us have lived quite a few decades. We've seen this. We've seen hard times and what comes out of them and we always come out a little higher than we were before. Spirit has always been greater than the confusion at any moment. History's full of dark passages, and yet new consciousness is always being born. So the world does not need less spiritual community right now. It needs more. It does not need more dogma. It does not need more exclusion. It does not need more fear. It does not need more of us versus them. It needs communities of healing, communities of sanity, communities of compassion, communities of practical spirituality. Communities where people can be reminded of who they really are. Communities that help people reconnect with meaning, with dignity, with belonging, and with purpose. That is what we are called to be. We are called to be that community. And that is why vision matters so much. Because if we cannot see the role that we are meant to play in this emerging future, we will unconsciously settle for maintaining ourselves in the old one. One of the things I love about unity is we recognize the wisdom that is found in every path, every spiritual path. In the Hebrew tradition, the prophets were not fortune tellers, they were visionaries. They called people back to covenant. They said, do not confuse comfort with faithfulness. Wake up and remember who you are. Return to the path. Islam said much the same things. As our world changes as we change, our communities change as we change. Native traditions always think about how what we do now affects 5 and 7 and more generations. And in Unity, of course, we have long taught that divine ideas precede outer manifestation. So first, there is an idea in the mind. There is a pattern in consciousness. There is a possibility to see with new vision, to see inwardly. And then, through faith, through love, through wisdom, and through action, that inner possibility begins to emerge, begins to take form. So whether we speak in the language of revelation, awakening, transformed consciousness, future generations, or divine ideas, the message is the same. A people of vision are a people who can see beyond the immediate and live in alignment with what they know is seeking to emerge. Even science tells us this. Science tells us that healthy communities do not thrive by accident. They thrive through shared purpose, through trust, through resilience, and the willingness of the people to work toward a common goal and a common future. In other words, vision is not just spiritual language. It's one of the real building blocks of community. So let's talk plainly about surviving and thriving. This is what we do on our town halls. How do we get through another month? That's what a surviving church asks. How do we hold on? How do we avoid catastrophe? How do we cut back enough to keep going? A thriving church says, how do we increase our capacity to serve? How do we deepen our impact? How do we make room for more healing, more education, more community? How do we become a stronger vessel for spirit? A surviving person says, well, I just hope that nothing else goes wrong. We've all done it. But a thriving person says, I am willing to grow into something larger than this moment. A surviving consciousness gets defensive, whereas a thriving consciousness gets expressive. Now again, please hear me. Survival consciousness is understandable. After enough stress, enough uncertainty, enough upheaval, survival mode becomes familiar. In psychology, we know that chronic stress narrows perception. It shortens the horizon. It makes it harder to imagine. It makes it harder to create, to risk, to hope. So if any of us have lived in survival mode, and I bet we all have at one time or another, it's not a moral failure. It's a human response. But it's not the place we want to stay. Spirit is always whispering to us, lift up your eyes. Look again. See further. Expect more. Do not confuse this current chapter of the story with the whole story. That's vision. Which brings me to a very practical spiritual point. If we are going to be a people of vision, if we are going to serve in greater ways, if we are going to emerge from the chaos of these times and be here for people when they need us, then we have to be fiscally healthy. Now, I know, the minute I begin talking like that, little alarm bells go off. I get it, I do. We've all seen unhealthy versions of that conversation in religious spaces. We have all seen manipulation and guilt and pressure and fear-based appeals and all the rest. That's not what this is. This is not about panic. It's not about shame. It's about alignment. If we believe this ministry matters, we must also take care and be mindful of the strength of the vessel through which the ministry happens. Physical health is not unspiritual. It is one expression of spiritual maturity. It allows us to plan, to respond wisely, to support staff and programs, and to serve from a place of strength instead of anxiety. And here's something else that I believe very deeply. When a people become truly committed to supporting the work of a spiritual community, it changes them. Not just the church, them. Because support is not merely a transaction. It is participation, it is identification, it is embodiment. It is saying, I believe in what we were doing. I believe lives are being changed. I believe this matters. I believe this is worthy of my energy, my love, my presence, and my support. When we're in that consciousness, something happens in us. We move from being occasional consumers of spiritual good feelings to committed co-creators of spiritual good in the world. Something shifts. We deepen, we strengthen, we mature, we align more fully with our own values. That shift is what moved me from working out in the corporate world and coming to church on Sunday to feel good to actually becoming a unity minister. There's power in being invested. There is joy in participating. There is blessing in helping create what blesses others. And that is one reason this is so important, because it reminds us that support is not just about keeping something going. It's about discovering what happens in us when we are committed instead of just treating it like a convenience. That's the move from surviving to thriving. Because thriving people are invested people, not just financially, but spiritually, relationally, and energetically. And sometimes the clearest way to understand what commitment really does is not just through a concept, but through a life. So before we move any further, I've asked one of our members, Brian Griesmeyer, our guitarist, to share how his life changed when he became truly committed to supporting the work we do today. Brian?
And I'll speak from this one over here if it's on. Can you all hear me? So I was trying to think about how to put this all together in a tight presentation, because I was really surprised when I reflected on how long I've been coming to Unity Spiritual Center here. It's actually been 14 years. And even to say that is just incredible to me, how much has happened in those 14 years. 14 years ago, in 2012, we were looking, and I say we, but I'm going to just mostly speak about myself here. I was looking for something new, something to help me through a very difficult transition and challenging place that I was in my own life at that time. I would call it a low point, but actually, I'll explain a little more on that later, that it really wasn't a low point, right? It was a growth opportunity. We found this church and started coming here, and as if anyone heard my Sunday talk I gave about not believing in God, right? I never grew up with any kind of religion at all, but when I came here, there were spiritual principles that I could immediately start applying in my life. The 5 principles, right? That God is everywhere, God is in us, and we are all inherently good. That I could agree with. And then the 3rd and 4th and 5th principle is that we create our own reality with our minds and our thoughts, and that we help connect with that through affirmations and meditation or prayer, whichever one you want to call it, or whatever practice calls to you. And then, of course, that's not enough. The 5th one, you actually have to put it into action, right? You can't just meditate all the time or just think thoughts. You actually have to do things that are in alignment with those other 4 principles. And I started putting that into practice in my life. I started meditating in my own time, and I started doing affirmations. I picked up some books from here. One was the 12 Powers meditation practice, and I started working through those. And I'll tell you, in 2012, me and my family, we were living with my mom. We were back in my mom's house. We were all crammed in there. Luckily, we had that space, right? That soft landing for this difficult time. anyone who's been through those sorts of challenges when you're just almost feeling desperate, right? That you want to get out of whatever you were in and run away from it and run to something new. And that really motivated me at the time. But when we started coming here and started connecting with these principles and this very simple practice of, hey, I'm going to think about things that I want, right? As opposed to thinking about the things I don't want. And putting that into practice through meditating and just practicing affirmations. And this wonderful book that was How to Pray Without Talking to God that I got here as well, that talked about the affirmative prayer practice. And to me, prayer was something very unfamiliar and almost like, I don't know if I want to do that. But affirmations, I could connect with that. And that's what I started to learn here at Unity, was to be able to just speak affirmatively, positively, and push away, right? Denials. Deny those things that are no longer me, that no longer serve me from my past or from the things that I was running away from at that time. And in our financial situation that we were in at the time, I was trying to find work, right? I was trying to find somewhere to provide for my family and to be able to eventually get out of my mom's house. And so when we came here and the messaging was, hey, though, part of this is action, right? You have to live in abundance to receive abundance. You have to believe that it's already there for you. And so I started volunteering my time here, along with my wife too. We served with the youth and family ministries with the children. And really, that's where I learned the most of the 5 principles, right? In very, very simply framed ways, and that really spoke to me. And we gave what we could at the time, to help keep that flow going. And I think that part of it's letting go, right? Letting go of the scarcity that you have in your mind of, we don't have enough. We don't have enough to cover what we need. It was, no, we will find a way. And it's not like a magical thinking affirmation, right? It's not just all flowers and believing that you're going to have something if you don't, because you have to put it into action. So I was still finding work, right? I was still doing what I had to do to get that. But I started to think a lot bigger for myself because of the concepts, because of the people that I was surrounded with here that were thriving in a community with these simple principles that I put into practice. And that's when I applied for law school. Within that next year, I applied for a lot of things in that time for my life. And I, some of them didn't work out, right? And I just kept looking for the door that was going to open for me. And that's the one that opened. And I remember practicing for taking the LSAT, which is the entrance exam for law school. And I remember doing the affirmative prayer practice, right? And I was breathing in confidence, breathing in knowledge, and exhaling doubt. Always exhaling doubt, because I had a lot of doubt at that time in my life. Doubt about who I was. And having to always reframe my thoughts with that 3rd principle of, I'm not my past. I'm so much more than that. I have something bigger that I'm becoming. And then I got into law school, right? And that was incredible. That was that door opening for me. And that's when things started to ease up. Not financially yet for me, so we still continued to just serve every way that we could here and give what we could financially as well. But that's all I could do, right? I wanted to give back to this community that had given me some tools that I could use, that I was applying every day in my life, trying to meditate, trying to connect with what that self was, trying to relearn who I was, to reconnect with things that from my childhood, right, that I either needed to remember or needed to deal with, that I think everyone probably has in their life. And so as we moved through that, I didn't really even realize how visible I was in this community when I first started here. I didn't have that awareness. And it wasn't until I was asked to serve on the board, sometime in 2015, so towards the end of law school for me, and that was kind of an eye-opener. I realized that I was actually no longer necessarily running away from my past. I was actually moving into a future. It's that going from surviving to thriving sort of transition. And that was, I think, the moment when I realized that I didn't have to run away from the past anymore. And really it's because of that reframing of everything that I said I would get back to, that I realized that difficult time that I was going through really was a blessing. That was actually an invitation to grow. And that was the sort of reframing that I heard every week here from the different messages, from the children, from everything, that these challenges we should welcome, because it gives us an opportunity to give more, to grow more, and to become more by overcoming those challenges and leaning into them, right? All these wonderful concepts that I learned here every week. And that's why when I look back at that time of my life, yeah, it seemed like a low point, but that was actually the seed, right, that was planted and started to sprout. And so it really wasn't a low point. It was a starting point. It was a transitional phase. But that sort of thinking made me realize, that I didn't have to run away from things anymore. And then when I started serving on the board, the growth happened exponentially at that point. And for many different parts of my life, I graduated law school, doing affirmative prayer again, trying to figure out where I was going to work as a lawyer, trying to pass the bar. Every time, breathing in confidence, exhaling doubt, doing meditative practices, and mostly, though, the affirmations is what really connected with me, and that's what I still use all the time. I'll tell you, over the years, it's really shifted my thinking. I don't have the negative thoughts intrude so much like they used to. I feel that they're just automatically replaced with positivity. Not to say that I'm overlooking the challenges, right? But I'm leaning into them and seeing them as opportunities to turn weaknesses into strengths and to grow. And so once I realized how visible I was, right, and that actually, oh wow, people know that I'm here, that I'm participating in this community, they see me, and that's when I started to see my own vision for myself. And this is what I think the call is for everybody, is to start to think about what is your vision for yourself and where does that fit in? Where does that fit in with other people who have similar visions? And I would suggest that Unity Spiritual Center of Albuquerque is a place where many people have a similar vision of themselves. And for me, right, it was just, how am I going to provide for my family? How am I going to get out of this place that I was at? But once it started to transition into something new, and I started to see the abundance and see what I had already grown into, that's when we started to give back even more financially. And that's actually when financially things started to grow for myself. And it's not magical though, right? I had to do a lot of work to get there. I had to get through law school, and I had to find a job and become a lawyer and start to really work that. And it's one of those things where you learn all this stuff in law school, but it doesn't really teach you how to be a lawyer, right? So then you come out and you're like, it's like being born again, brand new. I don't know what I'm doing. And luckily now I've been doing it for 10 years. So if you need legal work, I'm pretty good now. But but it's an always changing area. So it's again, that growth, that growing into something financially by giving away financially, by releasing, by letting go of the scarcity. We gave our time. We gave lots of it, even though we didn't have a lot, right? But the more I gave, the more time I got back to be able to do what I needed to do for myself and my family, to hold that vision, to turn from just surviving into thriving. And then, I hadn't really planned what I was going to say today, but I mean, it's a very personal journey for myself. And once I started serving on the board and doing the work of this community and kind of pulling the curtain back, right, and seeing what really went into this place, yeah, I mean, there's a flow of energy in the form of money, because that's what we use in this society, right, to exchange for things that we need. And so seeing that flow and understanding that when we let go and we let it flow out, that it can flow back in and it can manifest in our own lives, I started to put that into practice and pushing ourselves, pushing our budget so that we could give to this community, so that I could live what I was saying, as a board member, that, hey, we need this to make this place work in order to be able to provide the space for people to come together and find a common vision that isn't just providing for their families. It's actually being a light in the world, right? Living this truth so that people can see it, even if we don't have to proselytize, we don't have to go out there and get more people to come in. That's not what unity is. We attract through the energy, right, of just being what we are. And that's really the vision that I've begun to feel is most in line with who I want to be now. I just want to show up that way. And it all started with serving on the board and realizing the visibility that I already had, realizing that I had changed because I grew with this community, and this community gave me those opportunities. And because I took advantage of it by not thinking I didn't have enough, but by giving and doing more and more than I felt comfortable doing many times. But it every time made me grow and made more abundance come into my life. And so that's where I'm at now. I just want to be that vision. I really feel like it's harmonizing, right? It's a world of divine expression, and we see a lot of things that maybe it's difficult to harmonize, right? And the way I look at it from the work I did on the board and personal work is it's these shadow selves, right? And I don't know if anyone's heard that sort of phrase or that sort of work. It's a thing where you have to really shine the light on what your own traumas are, or what your own issues are, or things that maybe you bother you in other people, that you have to realize actually that's an invitation for me to address that myself. Because often it's only the things we notice that bother us in other people, it's because they bother us in ourselves. And so really harmonizing that and being able to be both, to be that shadow self and a light in the world, that's just what I'm trying to figure out and what I see as a vision for myself. And you know, I'm no longer on the board now. I play music now, and that's really where I get a huge amount of joy. That's why I just volunteer all my time for doing that. And then every time I have the chance, I still continue to live that abundance, right? And continue to financially support, because I can now. And it makes it flow back into my life with even more ease. And so that's my invitation to all of you. And that's where this place has helped me grow. And I hope that there's a similar vision that each of you has, or that each of you is starting to grow into, or maybe you're still back where I was 14 years ago, and that's fine too. That's what this place welcomes, so that we can all grow together, whatever stage we're at, because really the world needs this. The world needs more people just showing up and living the truth of being a light and trying to harmonize the darkness with that, because we have it all in us. And that's really my message today, and I hope it connected with some of you. And if anyone wants to talk more about it, I'm certainly open to that as well, but I don't want to use up too much time today. So, thank you.
Thank you, Brian. So what kind of people will we be? The deeper question is not what does the budget say or what are the numbers. Those matter, but underneath that is a deeper question. What kind of people will we be? Will we be a people of vision? Willing to imagine and support a future of greater service, deeper impact, and even stronger community? Or will we just be content to survive? Or will we decide to thrive? You know, one of the things that I don't think very many people realize, look around the room. There's 60, 65 people here today. We serve double that number in person in this building during the week. And there's many people watching us online. People find healing here. People find belonging here. People find language for hope here. People find spiritual tools here. People find prayer here. People find community here. People find a wider, more loving understanding of God here. And people find a place where they are not shamed, not excluded, not reduced, but welcomed as sacred just the way they are. And that matters. In times like these especially, that matters a lot. And because it matters, it deserves strength. It deserves vision. It deserves commitment. At the town hall, I'm going to be talking much, much more about vision. But I want to come back for a moment to that phrase, we will emerge. I believe it. And I believe that when humanity emerges from this chapter of chaos, fear, and fragmentation, communities like ours will be even more important. Why? Because people, and it's starting to happen, folks, people are hungry for depth. They're hungry for healing. They're hungry for inclusion. They're hungry for wisdom. They're hungry for a real spiritual practice that's authentic. They're hungry for communities that know how to bring people together across difference without requiring uniformity. They're hungry for a community that can welcome up one of their teenagers with great makeup, who will share the daily word with us. They're hungry for love that is intelligent, grounded, and brave. They're hungry for a message they are not getting in most churches nowadays. We can be that. We already are that in so many ways. But to become that even more fully, we have the opportunity to choose thriving over surviving, to choose vision over drift, to choose participation over passivity, to choose to learn how to say that word, to choose strength over fragility. And so let's ground that as we prepare to create a vision by going into a time of meditation. I invite you to close your eyes, get comfortable in your seats. We are a people of vision. Say that to yourself. I am a person of vision. I am a person of vision. And aligned with God, my vision is unlimited. I trust God, and I show up. I dream, but I also build. I think beyond this moment, this month, this year. I see the futures that I can help be a part of. Generations I will never see, but my energy will flow down to. I know that generosity is not loss, it is circulation. I know that health in the whole blesses every part. I know that what I nurture today becomes a shelter for someone tomorrow. And I know that I am a part of a community that believes that. A community of a people of vision. Not naive vision, but vision that is aware that life is real, that times can be hard, that challenges exist. But I know this: Spirit is greater, love is greater, possibility is greater. I know that regardless of appearances, there is only one presence and power in the universe and in my life: God, the good, omnipotent. And so I know that the future isn't fixed. God is expressing through it. I am, and we are, a people of vision. And so I opened myself up. I opened my eyes spiritually. What is my vision? What is my vision for myself, for my spiritual community, for my city, for my world? What is my vision? Do I identify with appearance? Or am I grounded in possibility? And if it's hard to come up with a vision, I ask, God, what am I not seeing? What is out there calling? What is saying, here I am possible? And in silent meditation, I am open for a new vision. I look with the eyes of God, the eyes that see unlimited abundance, unlimited possibility, unlimited opportunity, with eyes that see love, harmony, dignity. I am a person of vision. Say that deep in your heart. I am a person of vision. Breathe into it. Let it fill your entire being. I am a person of vision. I was created to thrive, and I thrive. And with hearts filled with gratitude, gratitude for new vision, new possibility, gratitude for the privilege and honor of being a part of new vision and new possibility. I say thank you, God. And so it is. Amen. The future is not fixed. God is still expressing. And we are a people of vision. Unity Spiritual Center is a place of vision. I am a person of vision. You are a person of vision. So remember, a people without vision perish, but a people with vision rise. And so today I invite you to do more than just listen. I invite you to remember who you are, to remember who we are. We are not merely here to preserve an institution. We are here to empower a mission. We are not here merely to survive history. We are here to serve this moment in history. We are not here to merely limp along. We are here to live life more abundantly. We are not here to ask, how little can we do and still continue? We are here to ask, how much good can we unleash? That's the question of vision. And I believe we are a people of vision. Do you?
Yes.
I believe we are called to be a blessing, not just to maintain, but to expand, not just to get by, but to thrive, not only here in the church, but in our personal lives. Our nation, our world needs people who have this consciousness. They're going through very difficult times. They need us, each one of us as individuals and as communities. So may we see clearly. May we choose courageously. May we support generously, and may we build faithfully. May we become ever more available to the healing, educating, loving work that Spirit wants us to do in our personal lives and through this community. And may we remember, a people without vision perish, but a people with vision rise. And it is our time to rise.